Yes, I know.
Room service, sir.
Hang on a minute.
Oh, he never drove fast. He never threw a punch. He just sat there sipping real ale, listening to Wagner, and somehow knowing exactly who did it before anyone else in the room had even opened their notebook. Inspector Morse wasn't supposed to work on television. Too cold, too literary, too slow. And the man they cast to play him, he almost turned it down flat. But something strange happened when the cameras rolled in Oxford. A detective show that broke every rule became one of the most beloved British dramas ever made. Dark secrets, real grief, and a character so complicated even the man who played him didn't fully understand him. These are 20 dark facts about Inspector Morse, and stay for the bonus, because the ending of this story is sadder than anything the writers ever put on screen. Hi, my name is Jerry, and this is Film Noir. Number 1. Before Inspector Morse ever appeared on television, he lived on the page, and he almost stayed there. Colin Dexter, the Oxford-educated crossword fanatic who created Morse, didn't begin writing the character because of some burning literary ambition. He started because he was stuck inside on a rainy holiday in Wales in 1973, bored out of his mind, and deeply unimpressed with the crime novel he was currently reading. He put it down, picked up a pen, and thought, I can do better than this. What emerged was a detective unlike anything in British crime fiction at the time. No action, no car chases, just a deeply flawed, opera-loving, crossword-solving, emotionally stunted man who drank too much and felt too much in equal measure. Dexter named him Endeavor Morse. Endeavor pulled from his own middle name. Morse borrowed from the American crossword setter Jeremy Morse. The publishers weren't overwhelmed. The first novel, Last Bus to Woodstock, came out in 1975 with modest sales and modest reviews. Nobody predicted a television empire. Nobody predicted a nation falling in love. They just saw a quiet book about a difficult man. And somehow, that was enough to begin everything.
Chief Inspector Morse.
The body's been...
Number 2. When ITV began developing Inspector Morse for television in the mid-1980s, the role didn't automatically belong to John Thaw. In fact, Thaw wasn't the first name on anyone's list. The producers initially circled several actors who fit a more traditional image of what a British detective looked like on screen. Broader, louder, more conventionally commanding. Thaw, at the time, was best known for playing the street-smart, rough-edged Detective Reagan in The Sweeney, a show that was practically the opposite of Morse in every way. Fast cars versus no car, fists versus crosswords. Reagan was all working-class fury. Morse was wounded. Oxford intellectualism. Many in the industry assumed Thaw couldn't make the leap. Even Thaw himself was uncertain. He read the scripts carefully, hesitantly, turning them over in his mind for weeks. What finally convinced him was the grief underneath the character. Not the intelligence, not the eccentricity, the loneliness. Thaw recognized something in Morse that he didn't broadcast publicly, something private and painful that he understood instinctively. He said yes, and within the first episode, every doubt evaporated. He didn't play Morse, he became him. The role would define his career, and eventually, in ways no one expected, outlast him. Number 3. Here's one most people don't know, and honestly, when I first found this, I had to double-check it 3 times. The famous Jaguar, arguably the most iconic car in British television history, wasn't chosen by the producers, the writers, or the network. It was John Thaw's personal demand. When discussions began about what kind of vehicle Morse would drive, several practical options were floated. Sensible, period-appropriate cars that fit a detective chief inspector's salary. Thaw rejected all of them. He insisted Morse drove a Jaguar, specifically a Mark II, because it told you everything about the character in one image. Here was a man who lived modestly, ate badly, drank heavily, and had almost nothing to show for his life, except this one beautiful, aging, slightly impractical machine that he loved completely. The car was aspiration and melancholy rolled into polished British steel. The production team eventually agreed, though budget concerns meant the Mark II used on set had a habit of breaking down between takes, which honestly felt very on brand for Morse. The car became so synonymous with the series that when it was auctioned after the show ended, it sold for significantly more than any sane person should pay for a second-hand Jaguar. But then again, Morse would have understood that completely.
Morse.
Very long nothing.
Number 4. The relationship between Morse and Sergeant Lewis was the emotional core of the entire series, and it nearly didn't exist the way audiences remember it. Kevin Whately, who played the patient, dependable, quietly decent Lewis, was not considered a star casting choice when he was brought in. He was a solid supporting actor, likable and professional, but few predicted that his chemistry with Thaw would become the engine that powered 33 episodes across 13 years. What made it work was something that couldn't be scripted or manufactured, a genuine, almost paternal dynamic that developed naturally between the two men off camera. Thaw, older and more established, took Whately under his wing. Whately, in turn, provided the straight man energy that made Morse's eccentricities land without tipping into caricature. The writers noticed it early and began writing directly toward that chemistry, giving Lewis more to do, more to push back on, more quiet moments of loyalty. That meant everything precisely because they went mostly unspoken. There's a warmth between them in the show that feels entirely real because, by most accounts, it was. Two actors who genuinely liked each other, playing two characters who would never say that out loud. Very Morse, very British, very effective. Number 5. Colin Dexter didn't just hand over his creation and walk away quietly to count his royalties. He was present, almost eerily present, throughout the entire television run. Not in a controlling, difficult way, but in a way that kept the show honest about its roots. Dexter made a cameo appearance in almost every single episode of Inspector Morse, tucked into the background of pubs, libraries, college quads, and crime scenes. It became something of a game for dedicated viewers, a long-running "Where's Waldo" that predated any formal acknowledgement from the production. Sometimes he's nursing a pint at a bar Morse wanders past. Sometimes he's reading a newspaper on a bench. Once he's so clearly visible in a scene that it's almost impossible to understand how the director didn't just give him a line. He never played a significant role, never spoke in any meaningful capacity, just existed in the world of the show as a quiet reminder of where it all came from. It's a small thing, but over 13 years and 33 episodes, it created an extraordinary hidden thread running through the entire series. The man who made Morse, haunting his own creation, which, honestly, sounds like something Morse himself might find mildly amusing over a pint.
Yes, of course I can.
Number 6. The drinking wasn't just a character quirk written in for color. It was the subject of serious internal debate throughout the production, and at several points, the network pushed hard to reduce it. ITV executives were concerned as early as the second series that Morse's relationship with alcohol was being depicted too warmly, too approvingly. Here was a protagonist who drank real ale in almost every episode, who kept whiskey in his desk, who solved murders while technically over any responsible limit. And the show never once framed this as a problem to be fixed. The producers and writers resisted the pressure to sanitize it, arguing correctly that the drinking was inseparable from the character's psychology. Morse drank because he was lonely, because he never married the woman he loved, because he found the world slightly too much to bear without a buffer. Take the drinking away, and you take away the damage. And without the damage, there's no Morse. Just a clever man with a crossword. The network eventually backed off, and the drinking stayed. John Thaw, it should be noted, was reportedly thoughtful about portraying it responsibly on screen, ensuring it always read as sadness rather than glamour. That's a harder line to walk than it sounds, and he walked it perfectly. Number 7. Oxford looked gorgeous on screen. Golden stone, dreaming spires, punts on the river. But filming there was, by multiple accounts, an absolute logistical nightmare that drove the production team quietly to the edge of sanity on a near-weekly basis. Oxford is a living, working city and university, not a studio backlot, and its residents and institutions had strong opinions about being treated as a film set. Colleges regularly refused access. Streets couldn't be cleared for more than brief windows. Tourists wandered into shots constantly, stopping to stare at cameras in ways that required whole scenes to be restarted. One production assistant reportedly said that filming a simple exterior shot in the city center could take 3 times longer than filming the same scene in a controlled environment would. The irony is that all of this difficulty produced something visually extraordinary. Because the city wasn't being performed, it was just being itself, indifferent to the cameras, carrying on at its own pace. And that uncontrollable authenticity is part of what makes the show feel so real, so specific, so unlike anything that could be recreated on a soundstage. The most beautiful location they ever used was also the most frustrating one. Oxford gave them everything and made them earn every frame of it. Number 8. The music deserves its own dark fact, because it's impossible to separate the show from what Barrington Fellowne created for it. The Inspector Morse theme is one of the most distinctive pieces of television music in British history. Brooding, melancholy, built on a musical motif that spells out M-O-R-S-E in actual Morse code tapped through the score. Yes, really. Go back and listen. It's in there. Fellowne, a British-Australian composer, was brought in early and given significant creative freedom, which he used to build something that functioned more like an opera score than a typical television soundtrack. The music didn't underscore the drama. It deepened it, moved with it, sometimes seemed to grieve alongside the characters. What fewer people know is that Fellowne occasionally used the same Morse code technique within individual episodes to tap out the name of the killer in the incidental music long before the reveal. A hidden message buried in the score for anyone paying close enough attention. It's the kind of deeply eccentric, deeply clever flourish that felt entirely in keeping with a show that never underestimated its audience. The killer's name, hidden in the music. Morse himself would have appreciated that more than anything. Number 9. John Thaw and the character he played shared something that went beyond performance, and it showed in ways the production didn't always plan for. Thaw was a deeply private man who struggled with his public profile, who found fame uncomfortable, and who carried personal griefs he rarely discussed. He had a complicated relationship with his own father, a difficult early life in Manchester, and a long-standing discomfort with the idea that playing hard, emotionally closed-off men was what he did best, even as he kept doing it, brilliantly, repeatedly. People who worked closely with him during the Morse years have described a man who found the character cathartic in ways that occasionally blurred the line between portrayal and something more personal. There were days on set when the loneliness Thaw was playing didn't feel entirely like acting. He was famously generous with the crew, warm with the cast, professional to his core. But there's a quality in his finest Morse scenes that goes somewhere deeper than craft. The scene in which Morse sits alone in his flat, listening to opera, not solving anything, just existing in his sadness. Those scenes hit differently when you know something about the man behind the detective, not method acting, something quieter and more honest than that. Number 10. Here's the fact that always stops people cold. The show ran for 13 years across 13 series, but the episodes were long, feature length, 90 minutes to 2 hours each, and were produced at a pace that would baffle modern television executives. Sometimes only 2 or 3 episodes aired in an entire year. By contemporary streaming standards, this sounds impossibly slow, almost amateurish. But that pace was a deliberate artistic choice, not a production failure. Producer Kenny McBain and later Chris Burt insisted on treating each episode as a film, not a television installment. The scripts went through extensive development. The filming schedules were generous by broadcast television standards. The post-production was careful and unhurried. The result was a show that looked and felt different from everything around it. Not better funded, but better considered. Each episode had the weight of something that mattered, and audiences responded with a loyalty that bordered on devotion. The long gaps between series didn't cool the audience. They sharpened the anticipation. When Morse returned to television after a year away, it was an event, not a content drop, not an algorithm recommendation, an event. There's a lesson somewhere in that about what patience and craft can build that urgency and volume never quite managed to match. Number 11. The show had a death problem, and not the fictional kind. Inspector Morse killed off its guest characters at a rate that began to attract genuine commentary from critics and viewers alike. Across 33 episodes, the body count was extraordinary, but more striking was the quality of the victims. The producers had a policy, rarely discussed publicly, of casting genuinely talented, often distinguished actors in roles that existed primarily to die. BAFTA winners, Royal Shakespeare Company veterans, respected stage actors making rare television appearances, all brought in, given beautifully written scenes, allowed to create real characters with real weight, and then murdered, usually within the first 15 minutes. It sounds callous written out like that, but the effect on screen was profound, because you felt every death. Nobody was a throwaway corpse. Nobody existed just to move the plot. The victims had lives, histories, contradictions, and Morse, crucially, felt that. He grieved for people he'd never met in ways that said everything about his own accumulated sorrow. The show understood something that modern procedural television often forgets entirely, that a murder mystery is only as powerful as the murder. Make the audience mourn the victim, and everything that follows carries genuine moral weight. Make them a prop, and you've got nothing but puzzle mechanics dressed up in a detective's overcoat. Number 12. Colin Dexter killed Morse in the novels before the television series even finished airing, and the collision between those two timelines created one of the strangest situations in British popular culture. The final Morse novel, The Remorseful Day, was published in 1999 and ended with Morse dying of complications from his long-term diabetes, a condition Dexter had written into the character years earlier, as a quiet-skin consequence of every bad meal and skipped medical appointment. The television series was still running. John Thaw was still playing the character. Audiences who had read the book knew what was coming. Audiences who hadn't were blissfully unaware. For a period of approximately 2 years, Inspector Morse existed simultaneously as a living television character and a dead literary one. A strange purgatory that Dexter navigated with characteristic restraint, never crowing about the ending, never spoiling it for those who didn't know. When the television finale eventually aired, it followed the novel's conclusion. Morse died on screen, and the audiences who'd known it was coming cried anyway, because knowing something is going to hurt and being ready for it are two entirely different things. Dexter later said, writing that ending was the hardest thing he ever did. You believe him completely. Number 13. John Thaw was seriously ill during the final years of filming, and almost nobody outside his immediate circle knew. He had been diagnosed with esophageal cancer, a diagnosis he kept intensely private, consistent with a lifelong instinct to protect his personal life from public consumption. He continued working. He continued appearing at events. He gave interviews that revealed nothing. On set during the final episodes, crew members have spoken since about noticing he was thinner, moving more carefully, tiring more easily. But Thaw deflected every concerned question with professionalism and quiet firmness. He died in February 2002, just months after the final episode aired in November 2000. The proximity is devastating when you sit with it. He spent some of his final months of relatively functional health finishing Morse, giving the character the ending the story required, knowing at some level that he was simultaneously closing his own chapter. There's a scene in the final episode, Thaw sitting alone in a hospital bed, the character fading, the performance stripped of every actorly device down to something completely bare and human. And you cannot watch it now without understanding that the line between what was performed and what was simply true had become very thin indeed. That scene will never stop being one of the bravest pieces of television acting this country has produced. Number 14. The final episode, broadcast on November 15, 2000, drew over 13 million viewers, an audience figure that modern British television drama would consider essentially unreachable. But the number that's more revealing is what happened in the days that followed. ITV's switchboard received thousands of calls, not complaints, condolences. Viewers rang a television network to express grief over the death of a fictional detective, in the way you might ring to acknowledge a bereavement in someone's family. Cards arrived, letters arrived. Flowers were sent to the production company. A man in Yorkshire reportedly held a small gathering at his local pub, raising a glass of real ale because it felt like the right thing to do. None of this was organized. None of it was prompted. It was entirely spontaneous public mourning for a character who had lived in people's homes, on their screens, through their evenings for 13 years, and had somehow become real to them in a way that is genuinely difficult to explain rationally, but completely understandable emotionally. Television can do that occasionally when everything aligns: the writing, the performance, the time, the patience, the accumulated weight of years. Inspector Morse is one of the very few British shows that ever achieved it so completely and so honestly. 13 million people said goodbye. That still matters. Number 15. Here's one that gets overlooked because Endeavor tends to absorb all the prequel conversation. But there was serious development work done in the 1990s on a potential American remake of Inspector Morse. The discussions got further than most people realize. American networks were interested in the procedural structure, the puzzle box mysteries, the prestige feel. Scripts were commissioned. Casting conversations apparently happened. The central obstacle, beyond the obvious cultural transplant difficulties, was the character himself. American network television in the 1990s had a profound institutional allergy to protagonists who were this unresolved. Morse doesn't grow. He doesn't learn lessons. He doesn't find love and keep it. He doesn't get better. He just gets older and sadder and more brilliant and more alone. And the show never once suggests this will change, because it won't. That's not a character arc, that's a character truth. And American network executives of that era, in fairness to them, correctly identified that their audience infrastructure wasn't built for it. The remake quietly died in development. British television kept Morse where he belonged. In Oxford, in the rain, in a Jaguar that kept breaking down, listening to music that made him feel things he couldn't say to another living person. Number 16. The women in Morse's life were written with a consistency of outcome that bordered on structural cruelty, and it was entirely intentional. Across the novels and the television series, Morse falls for women repeatedly, genuinely, painfully, with all the romantic intensity of a man who has read too much poetry and learned nothing useful from any of it, and it never works, not once. The woman is married, or she's the killer, or she's the victim, or she simply chooses someone less complicated. Which, when your alternative is a man who will cancel dinner for a crossword and considers emotional availability an optional feature, is a reasonable decision. Dexter built this pattern deliberately, using it to illuminate something true about a certain kind of intelligent, emotionally avoidant man who desires connection deeply and simultaneously makes it almost impossible. The television writers honored it faithfully. What could have become repetitive instead became genuinely moving over time, because each failed romance added another layer to the accumulated portrait of someone who understood human nature with extraordinary precision and understood his own almost not at all. It's one of the great character contradictions in British drama. The detective who solves everything, consistently unable to solve the one problem that actually costs him something. Number 17. Kevin Whately nearly left the show midway through its run, and the reasons involved both professional ambition and a legitimate concern that Lewis had reached the ceiling of what the role allowed him to do. By the 5th or 6th series, Whately was being offered other significant projects. He was a recognizable, respected actor with his own growing audience, and the structural reality of Inspector Morse was that Lewis existed primarily in relation to Morse. He reacted. He absorbed. He provided the audience's entry point into plots that Morse navigated at a higher altitude. It was valuable, skillfully done, and ultimately limiting, in the way that all supporting roles eventually become limiting for actors who are ready for something more. Conversations happened. Compromises were reached. The writers expanded Lewis's personal life, gave him more scenes that existed independently of Morse, tried to create breathing room within the partnership. Whately stayed, and the show was immeasurably better for it, because whatever the structural constraints of the role, what Whately brought to Lewis transcended them. The loyalty, the decency, the quiet competence. It wasn't a star turn, it was a human performance. And those are rarer and more valuable than most awards. Ceremonies remember to acknowledge. Number 18. Inspector Morse almost single-handedly transformed Oxford's tourism industry, and the city has had a complicated relationship with that fact ever since. Before the show, Oxford attracted visitors for its university, its history, its architecture. After the show, it attracted a second wave of pilgrims who wanted to stand outside pubs where Morse drank, walk streets where murders were solved, find the colleges that appeared in their favorite episodes. Tourism operators embraced it quickly and commercially. The university itself was more ambivalent. Several colleges that had initially cooperated with filming pulled back in later series, uncomfortable with being associated, however fictionally, with a steady supply of murders, affairs, academic corruption, and institutional cover-ups. Because one of the quiet running themes of Inspector Morse is that Oxford's beauty conceals considerable darkness, that the establishment protects itself, that privilege and education don't produce better people, just better disguised ones. That's not a message every Oxford college wanted beamed into 13 million British homes every year. The show filmed around the Resistance, found cooperative locations, and kept making the city look simultaneously gorgeous and morally suspect. Oxford got the tourism. It just didn't always enjoy the subtext that came with it. Number 19. The show's influence on British television drama is so pervasive it's almost invisible now, like furniture you've stopped seeing because it's always been there. Before Inspector Morse, the dominant model for British detective drama was faster, cheaper, more procedural. Cases resolved in 50 minutes, characters reset between episodes, emotion kept functional rather than exploratory. Morse changed the template fundamentally. It demonstrated that audiences would sit with a slow, literary, feature-length detective story and love it, return to it, invest in it over years. Every prestige British crime drama that followed, Prime Suspect, Cracker, Wire in the Blood, Broadchurch, owes a structural debt to what Morse established about pace, character depth, and the willingness to let difficult protagonists remain difficult. The feature-length format became not just acceptable, but desirable. The flawed, brilliant, emotionally damaged detective became not just a character type, but an expectation. An entire genre recalibrated itself around what one show proved was possible. That's not influence, that's legacy. And the extraordinary thing about legacy is that it keeps working long after the thing that created it has finished, spreading forward through time in ways its originators never planned and couldn't have predicted, quietly reshaping everything it touches. Number 20. Colin Dexter spoke at John Thaw's memorial service in 2002, and what he said has been quoted and requoted in the years since, because it captures something that resists more clinical description. He said that John Thaw hadn't just played Morse, he had completed him, that the character on the page was always partially formed, always missing something that Dexter knew was there but couldn't quite render in prose. And that watching Thaw work over 13 years had shown him what that missing thing actually was. Humanity, Dexter said. Not intelligence, not complexity. Humanity. The capacity to be genuinely, visibly hurt by the world while continuing to move through it. Dexter was not a sentimental man by reputation, and he delivered these remarks with characteristic precision and control. But those who were present have described a room that went completely silent, the kind of silence that happens when something true is said plainly in public, and everyone recognizes it simultaneously. The man who created Morse telling the room that another man had finished the job. It's a remarkable thing to say. It's a more remarkable thing to mean. And it is perhaps the best possible summary of what made Inspector Morse something beyond entertainment, beyond craft, beyond even great television. It was a collaboration between a writer and an actor across 13 years that produced something neither could have made alone. Bonus fact. Here's the one that quietly breaks your heart if you let it. When filming wrapped on the very last episode of Inspector Morse, John Thaw sat alone in the Jaguar for a while before getting out. No cameras, no crew watching particularly closely, just a man in a car that had become as associated with him as his own face, sitting with whatever that moment required. Nobody has reported exactly how long he sat there or what expression he wore, because nobody wanted to intrude. Eventually he got out, walked back to the production area, thanked the crew with the thoroughness and warmth he always brought to those moments, and left. The Jaguar was driven away to storage. Thaw was dead 16 months later. There's no neat conclusion to add to that. No reframing that makes it tidier or more bearable. Just a man sitting in a car at the end of something, knowing it was the end, taking whatever time he needed before walking back into the rest of his life. Inspector Morse ran for 13 years and ended the only way a show like that could, not with a resolution, but with absence. An empty car, a silent flat, Wagner still playing somewhere, and a crossword left unfinished on the table.